then because of this success, the timing of something called Moser Labs getting created compared to when we finished this was actually nice, because then this concept was fresh in our idea of creating a visualization of the Jira tickets.
Moser Labs as a concept is a little bit different for consulting. It's a startup within our business, and we produce apps that solve business problems that Moser actually experienced.
At least for me personally, I think it helped out. I'm definitely a visual person, so like I mentioned before, thinking previously how we were going to break everything up, when Mark showed us this, I think it gave definitely a big sense of confidence.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Summer of Atlassian. Today I have not just one, but three guests. We are going to be talking with the folks over at ClearPath, an up-and-coming Atlassian app, and we're excited to be here. So since it's such a big group, usually it's like an origin story of the one person, but why don't we go around the room a little bit and kind of introduce each other? Mark, maybe you want to lead off and get everybody going.
Yeah, I can start that off. So I'm Mark Brickley. You might have seen me on Alex's channel or his podcast before. I'm the product manager at ClearPath, but I'm also the director, one of the directors of app services at Moser Consulting. And as part of the origin story, we're focusing on the concept of the team. It's not just one person who brings an app to life. It's a team, and it's the team that builds it, the team that markets it, the team that helps sell it. So we want to bring some of the other people who have kind of helped out, particularly that origin story, and give their experiences. Natalie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Natalie Fischesser. I'm also one of the directors in Mark's group, but the director over Moser Labs. And prior to that, I worked as a Scrum Master and UX designer.
My name's Colby Miller. I am a senior developer over at Moser Consulting. I've been working with Mark and Natalie for probably 5-6 years now. It's been a while, and yeah, happy to be here.
Well, thank you all for being here. As Mark mentioned, right? It's an interesting and unique perspective to see. Usually I'm talking with like the product manager, or I'm talking to like the marketing person of an app. And so to have like the founding members here, I think it'll be an interesting conversation. So I guess let's take me back to day one. What was the problem? Why did you guys all come together and said we need to invest resources into building ClearPath?
Oh, well, I guess the story really kind of starts before that. I mean, that was
Before,
kind
even
of,
before
yeah, before that,
the
because
year was.
yeah, well, so what it was is all three of us, we were on a team with other members. I was the product owner, Natalie was Scrum Master, UI UX, Colby was the developer, but really we had 6 developers on the Scrum team. It was a rather large Scrum team, and we were doing some of our normal work that we do at Moser Consulting. Natalie, do you want to give an overview of what Moser Consulting is?
Yeah, sure. So, Moser is a traditional IT consulting firm. We've been in business for about 25 years and do a lot of different work for our customers. The three of us work in application development. So we build software products every day. That can be anything from new software to mobile apps and modernization of legacy apps. And that's kind of where ClearPath originated, was during one of our modernization projects.
Correct. Yeah. So there was a particular customer that we all worked on. Kind of their story. They were a local Indiana company. They had grown quite a bit, from starting out with 6 employees to hundreds and being a global company. And when they built their system, they used technology of the time, which was COBOL. And COBOL is something that's kind of hard to find people to maintain and continue to develop. So they had come to us because they had kind of realized, in order for them to continue, their business, they had to start thinking about that modernization. And that's a great use case to come to consultants for, because that's usually a pretty heavy lift. You want people to know what they're doing, have experience with that. So that's what we are helping them with. In modernization efforts, you look at a lot of things in the system. Usually it's a mixture of custom apps as well as commercial off-the-shelf ones, interfacing with each other, integrating. There's flow of data. So there might be logical dependencies that you have in how you upgrade the system. One of the things that we did that was kind of unique for them, though, was since they were in COBOL the whole time, was basically a mainframe application. Something that they didn't have that was always on their wish list was like a customer-facing web portal where customers could come in and order products and services on their own. So even though we were modernizing the system, we prioritized giving them that feature early. And by doing that, they had actually gotten like $100,000 more business every month because of it. So that prioritization on the roadmap that Moser Consulting did helped to pay our bill going forward. And that modernization effort was going really, really well until something happened. And then we kind of had to shift gears a little bit and be under the gun to do a challenging project. Alex, do you want to take a guess of anything that's happened in the past couple of years that affected a lot of companies?
Migration to the cloud?
COVID. When COVID happened, right, a lot of businesses shut down. They weren't, buying as much product, as much services. Employees weren't going to their businesses. So this company, which had been expanding and growing quite a bit, they had gotten to the point where then they had a contraction, that they didn't have as much revenue coming in as what they had. So even though we were modernizing, what we need to do is we need to shift and help them with the lost revenue that they had to keep things going. One of the things that they prided themselves in was over like 10 years, they had never raised prices once on customers. That even as prices went up and inflation went up, they found efficiencies to keep the costs the same. So the client came to us with a challenge, and this plays very key to ClearPath, is what they needed to do was actually raise prices on all their customers, which is something they had never really done. Like I said, in 10 years, the system wasn't actually designed for that use case. But it wasn't just raising prices. It was, raising prices on product, raising prices on services, but not every client was getting the same increase. Some clients had just, came on with the company a couple months before, and they couldn't, raise the price on a brand new customer all of a sudden. That'd be bad business. Also, there's clients that are really big, like, just pick a big company. Let's say GE is your client and they're giving you millions of dollars a year. You're not going to raise the price on them as much as someone who's a little bit smaller who doesn't give you as much business. That I'll say Costco model of, buying in bulk and volume. There was also, factors such as it was a global company. So they had clients all over the world. It was different currencies, but you couldn't just do like a straight currency exchange. There's also different suppliers, so how much they needed to raise prices depending on their supplier increases was different. There was a lot of customization that went in there, as well as they wanted to kind of help their clients understand the real impact. So they wanted to pull in historical data and say, historically, here's what your costs have been. Here's the most ordered products, the most used services, this is how it's going to affect you, and give them a 30-day notice before the prices took effect. These are a lot of factors. So far, the only time frame I gave you was 30 days notice. They want us to give them 30 days notice, do all this new code, something the system wasn't designed for, in a 60-day period. So that's something that, the team, I went to them and explained to them what the client was asking for. Natalie, Colby, do you remember what your thoughts were when I came in and said all that to the team? Let's get this done in 60 days.
Yeah. When Mark first brought it to us, definitely the complexity of the project and the timeline definitely gave, I'd say, the development team a lot of anxiety, kind of trying to figure out how we were going to break everything down into like smaller bite-sized pieces to try to get everything streamlined and done on time. There's the systems, like Mark explained, are very complicated data relationships. There's a bunch of different systems that we need to correlate data between. There's just a lot of moving pieces. So I just know from a developer perspective and like from our team, it's kind of overwhelming at first and trying to just figure out how we were going to get ourselves successfully to that deadline.
Yeah, and then as a Scrum Master, you just worry that with all your developers kind of freaking out, having anxiety, and very unsure about, being able to deliver, you want to make sure that you keep the morale up and keep everyone on track. And, it's always a little anxiety inducing when it's a tight turnaround.
So we got a new delivery then, 60 days, lots of
60
changes.
Yes.
What happens next?
Well, I admit, the reaction that I kind of remembered from the developers was a little bit more intense than
Then what Kobe just said?
It was a heck no.
60 days to change a lot of those changes, right? There's so many variables you described that needed a change, but you're not accounting for all the new variables you're going to create with changing code. Because every time you touch anything, right, it's a recipe for a lot of things to change.
Right, correct. And I admit my initial reaction too when I was talking with the client was, wow, that this is going to take longer than that, because, you know, I'm very experienced product owner. In my head, I was already thinking about, you know, what's the long pole in the tent is the colloquial way we'd say it, but the critical path. What are the things that are really going to drive the schedule? I'm like, gosh, this is something I would normally say would be 3 months, and we need to do it in 2. But an advantage that I had, and a lot of product owners have, is, you know, I wrote all the tickets. So as I'm writing them, I'm getting a mental picture of how they all relate to each other. And I'm already getting a mental picture of organization who might pick up tickets and that. So when I went into that meeting, I was actually thinking, you know, hey, this is going to be tough, but I think we can do it. And I could sense from the team there was a struggle for them because they wanted to do it. This client was a client that we had for a long time. You know, some of our developers actually like golfed with them. You know, we kind of consider them part of the Moser family to an extent. So it's something we wanted to come through for, and we wanted to find a way to get this done because we knew it was important to them.
But now, if I'm following along correctly, though, this was a client asking you to make a change for like a service / product you provided for them. So we still haven't even entered ClearPath.
We have not. Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so you got a team of people that are just going to have to come together and move a mountain.
Correct. So what I did was with the tickets, I said, okay, let's just start grooming them. You know, let's get our estimates, kind of get an understanding, talk about them more. And that kind of gave me a basis. And I was thinking, you know, how can I help them see what I see? You know, how can I help them get into my head? And something that came to mind was something that I had actually done before with a number of teams. Usually I'm a person who draws a lot of things on a whiteboard. Colby and Natalie, I'm sure, are probably laughing inside because they're like, he draws a lot more than a lot. I'm one of those people who have trouble explaining things without a whiteboard. But visualizations, they help a lot. There's a reason why they say a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So usually I'd be drawing on a whiteboard, but at a previous job, let's see, can I screen share here?
You should be able to, yeah. There's a little square with a plus button in it. Almost looks like a medical thing.
I'm going to see if I can do that here.
Colby, I'm a former wannabe developer myself here. And so you get this like new request, right, to make these amount of changes. Like I gotta imagine that maybe imposter syndrome is not the right word, right? But anytime we're making drastic changes quickly, that can lead to other unintended consequences. So what was your headspace at with like respect to, okay, we're going to change a lot of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's what I was kind of saying. I think we all just kind of had a lot of anxiety around that, a lot of feelings that we were trying to do it in a way that we wouldn't kind of break existing functionality in a way. But luckily what it was all kind of, it was like a bunch of like one-off kind of scripts and stuff like that. So we weren't really affecting like current code. We were kind of, the stuff we were doing was more outside of the larger code base, which kind of gave us a little bit of relief. But it was more just pulling from a bunch of different sources and trying to correlate all that data together to generate, you know, different things for the client. So, but yeah, it was definitely tough.
And then Natalie, I'm assuming that for you, right? How well did you know the application at this point?
For me, I had been involved very early on from the UX perspective. So helping interview their users before we got started, It did start with a self-serve store, like online store. So I had been involved with that. The particular piece that they're talking about, I can't remember, Mark. Did I do comps for that? I don't feel like it was as comp intensive or anything involved with it. So my role on this was really more from the Scrum Master perspective and, keeping things moving, making sure.
So let me ask you then
everything's going.
a question I think would be very relevant to the audience here, right? So knowing that you initially built a lot of those comps in that initial interaction with the app, or at least early on, maybe not the initial ones, but knowing that you had your hands in there, right? Like that you've been involved with the project for a while. How do you feel that knowledge helped you as a Scrum Master to lead the team?
I mean, it's with working with Mark, you're always pretty far ahead. So you always know what's coming before the developers do, especially from UX and then Scrum Master. We talk a lot. So, he being very confident with his drawings and the stories, he can knock stuff out so fast that, I was a little more confident and relieved than I think the developers were because of my conversations with Mark. But developers are normally a little more risk averse and I don't know, want to make sure they're.
And I think this goes back to a conversation that Mark and I have actually had, right? Where we were like, I think one time we were discussing what comes first, the comp or the code, right? Like how much, or it was a story, right? How much of it is the comp versus how much is the story versus the requirement? And I think we were just trying to figure out which one's the chicken, which one's the egg, which one, where's the head, where's the tail at? Because like you can design something, right, Natalie, and the art of the possible is on your side of the job. But when we come back to Colby, it's reality, right? It's what is actually technologically possible.
Yeah, and I mean, we battle that every day. I'm very fortunate to work very closely with the developers. So, often once comps are ready, if the requirements are met, the client approves it, we go to the developers and have that back and forth. It's never set in stone. It's always iterative and we're always refining and working because you're going to have technical limitations no matter how well you design something and have to compromise.
And how much do you feel like, I'm assuming you're not a coder?
No, I'm not.
Right. But what level of comfort do you think you need to have to be able to, be in that conversation with the developers, challenge them, accept their challenges back to you? Like, do you think that plays a role in your decision?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely does. But, I think when you've been doing this long enough, you just learn the lingo. You do have to understand what's possible. You have to have a basic understanding of the frameworks and programming languages they're all working in and what those limitations are. It's helpful to speak their language, and you have to trust your team as well. And when you do, the back and forth is a lot easier. If they tell you they can't do it, or there's maybe a better way to do it to make the delivery faster, there's always room for compromise.
Cool. Well, Mark, how are we doing over here?
I think we're good. I mean, we'll give it a try here and pick back up. Okay. So what I had done was I kind of said, okay, something I'd done for a team before instead of putting on a whiteboard was in one of my previous employments was I took all the user stories and I put them in boxes and I showed the dependencies in line. And then I color coded it because this was something that was a process that was a handoff between different types of users, whether you were the owner, or you had read-only permissions or edit. So I'd shown this diagram of how all the user stories related to each other. And at my previous job, just like a light bulb went off with the developers. They're able to see basically the method to the madness of how all the user stories were in the backlog and be able to execute to it. So I said, okay, how about I do the same thing here? However, we were crunched on time. Remember, it was 60 days. So what I created for the team this time isn't quite as pretty. What I had done was I had gone in and I went into the Jira backlog view and I just done screenshots of what the ticket titles were. In red numbers, I put the number of story points that each ticket was. And then I went back to the team talking about how everything grouped together, where how I represented it was any ticket that was unblocked was on the top row and the dependencies were shown in line. So for example, here, these two tickets They both blocked this third one here. So we need to complete both of those before we got here. And it was creating a blueprint of implementation for the team, but they could see the natural patterns of, okay, out of everything that's here, over here, this is all product lists. There's someone who's a subject matter expert of that. Over here, this is all the testing services. We have someone who's a subject matter expert. But then I could get to where the real difficult part of the implementation was, and that was generating these form letters with all the data in them to send out to the clients, because some of them were being emailed, some were being, snail mailed. They had to have the correct data about the services and goods and the client. And what I did is, in yellow, is I summed up the number of story points in each path through the stories.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about that.
And PEMDAS, I like to call it PEMDAS, but order of operation, right? It's super important, because I remember from my developer days, and again, not to stereotype or assume all developers are the same, but we like to work on easy stuff first, right? But the easy stuff might not be in the right order, right? Yep. Sometimes we've got to go work on the hard part. So I can appreciate a picture like this, because it basically guides you into like, hey, this is what we got to work on in this particular order, so that we're nice to your future self.
Correct. And it's really applicable that you had said working on the easy stuff first, because when I talked about critical path with the team and said, everything else, every path that we have, of course, we got to get it done. But this path of tickets right here is the one with the most story points. The first ticket that had to be done was the most story points. It was the 8-pointer. So you really did have to say, nope, we got to start with the hard one and kind of get cranking.
Right.
But being able to take everything that we have and kind of lay it out and say, here's the plan, and say, what we really need to say is this path of tickets here. Can we get that done in 6 weeks? Everything else, I'm sorry, not 6, 2 months. So that's 8 weeks.
Yeah. Public math, Mark, don't worry. It's never.
But that's really what we got to look at. Everything else is stuff we need to get done, but we have 6 developers on the team. We have a lot of capacity where we could parallelize the work. This is what really mattered. And that's what we were talking about as a team. And I felt once I showed this diagram, and then as a team, we were talking about it, the way the whole team talked about the initiative started to change. I felt it wasn't, we can't do it. It was, hold on, maybe we can. How can we do it? But, Colby, what are your thoughts? Do you remember that time where we were walking through this and what the developers might have been slacking each other directly about what they thought, as opposed to telling me?
I mean, at least for me personally, I think it helped out. I'm definitely a visual person. So like I kind of mentioned before, thinking previously how we were going to break everything up, when Mark kind of showed us this, I think it gave definitely a big sense of confidence. We were definitely still very stressed, but it was like a confident stress. like we knew that we had our path and our vision towards the end goal. And then, like Mark was saying, because we as all of our whole team had been on this project for a long time, so we each kind of started to grow an area of expertise. So I think as developers, we were able to kind of say like, hey, it'd be a lot faster if you knocked out, this left swim lane here, because, or what path, whatever you'd call it, because you have the most experience over there, and I think you'd be able to get it done the fastest. So we kind of broke it out like that, and I think as developers that helped. And then being able to just see this big picture when it came to blockers, I think helped a lot as well. So if somebody finished one of their tickets and they might not have had a immediate ticket, or at least not one of like huge importance in their kind of stack that they were working through, they can look over and say, hey, I know, for example, Colby's working on this ticket, this 8-point ticket that's blocking, I don't know, 4 others. I can't see the diagram too well, but is there anything I can do to help you get that done faster so that we can then just continue moving forward as a team? So I think that definitely helped a lot. I think it built our confidence up. And like Mark was saying in our chat, we all kind of just knew what was going on. We had a plan at that point, and I think it really helped.
Yeah, and this is just to kind of add, again, my perspective from my experience here. When you're in Jira, and were you guys even using Jira at this point, Mark?
Oh, yes. All the tickets were in Jira, yes.
Just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to assume things. I've been told that I make too many assumptions in my life.
But we did, I will say, before I did this diagram, I did say to myself, like, all the information's in Jira. I've created the tickets, I've created the relationships. So I did look in the marketplace to say, hey, there's got to be an app that does something like this. And I did find quite a few apps, but I didn't like pretty much all the apps I found, or they didn't do exactly what I was looking for, which is why I said, okay, I'll just spend the time creating the diagram myself and then kind of updating it through the process.
Right.
As you can see here.
And I think, Alex, your point about Jira, yeah, we had all the tickets, but at least for me, sometimes when you're like digging through a Jira backlog, there hadn't been anything that gave you that picture visualization of like all the blocking things, right? Without, at least that I knew of, without individually clicking through tickets in an Epic or a release and saying like, okay, this one's going to block these three. So it was doable, but this just gave us a way quicker way of visualizing what was kind of going on.
But not only that, but I'm loving the check marks I'm seeing here too, right? Because you can also visually, as you're progressing through making progress, you can watch and actually see that progression.
Yeah, correct. So I was doing that. I was just, if the ticket got picked up that day, I was throwing a yellow check mark. If it got finished, I did a green check mark, and I was throwing the updated image out in Slack every day during stand up so that people could see it to kind of get that status, because plans are only so much, right? It doesn't matter what the plan was 4 weeks ago. It's what's the plan today to finish.
Yeah, I had a chief engineer. She said, you never want to show up to battle without a plan. Even if the plan changes the minute you get on the battlefield, you don't want to get to the battlefield without the plan.
So Natalie, from your perspective as Scrum Master, like how did you view things once we had this diagram and once we started executing?
Yeah, I mean, this was already a very strong team and mostly self-organized, really top-notch developers. But, I think having this common guide to work from really helped elevate them to the next level. They started working together more cohesively. We were being more efficient in our just even our stand-ups. So stand-ups, people were collaborating a whole lot more when they could see that there was a story in the critical path on this diagram. They were stepping up to say, hey, I can help you. Or if PRs were coming in and it was on the critical path, they knew to jump on that right away. I don't know. There was a lot more collaboration, a lot more communication happening throughout those 2 months.
And that's what you want with Scrum teams. Like a Scrum team, one of the goals is to get everybody to a shared understanding. And this helped to add value in a way that just the tickets by themselves in Jira didn't.
Right.
And people knew what that goal was. I'll go ahead. Spoiler alert, we did finish on time. We succeeded. The client was happy. The team was real happy too. I mean, that's something that I think when you look at employees, coworkers, everybody wants to do something where they feel like they've added value. Nobody likes just checking a box. And, I could see from everybody at the end of the day that they felt proud of the fact that they were able to accomplish something that at the beginning we didn't think we could. And then also we could come through for a customer that, we really, really wanted to. It's someone we really like working with. So yeah, it was pretty impressive in the end. And then because of this success, the timing of something called Moser Labs getting created compared to when we finished this was actually kind of nice, because then this concept was fresh in our idea of creating a visualization of the Jira tickets. Natalie, is Moser Labs something you want to kind of give a little bit of info about?
Sure, I can touch on that. So, Moser Labs as a concept is a little bit different for consulting. It's a startup within our business, and we produce B2B apps that solve business problems that Moser actually experienced. So I think anytime we have a new product and it's successful with our internal teams, or we hear about a new idea, we all do get very excited. And when I became director of Moser Labs, Mark brought up the idea of creating an app and putting it on the marketplace. And, it really was a no-brainer, especially with his excitement and experience. And it being a new channel and a new way to sell our apps, we just had to see what we could do with it.
Yeah, and I would say when we went, of course, it's great to make money. That's kind of the necessary evil of business. But we also just saw like our teams, that team, and how they went from being a good team to a great team in the execution. We kind of also said, like, wouldn't it be great just to have an app for our own internal use to help all our teams?
Yeah.
So going to the
and
marketplace,
not do it manually.
yes, not have to do it manually. Yes.
I had a job where I did something very similar, and literally my full-time job was updating the picture.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, no one wants to do manual, especially, that's a common thing in software when people know how to code something, they'll look and say, I don't want to do this manually. How can I code it to do it instead?
I'm the opposite. I have a threshold of like, I'm willing to manual a certain level, and then after that, then I'm like, it's worth scripting. But I'm like, if I can knock it out in an hour, I'll waste an hour, because it's gonna take me more than an hour to figure out the code.
Yeah, so with the app, Nal and I talked about it and said, we haven't built an Atlassian app before.
But
Let's see if we
before
can
we
do
go
it.
there, though, why an Atlassian app?
Because we're using Jira.
Okay.
So that's where all the data was. It seemed to make sense. We were using Jira. And when you think about a user experience, you want to kind of stay in that same ecosystem. If you have to go to a different product, especially if it has a different look and feel, it's a disjointed experience often. So it feels more natural. It feels better to kind of have it all together. So
And I think it improves our adoption rates too. If we want our teams to use it and it's in one spot, it's just more seamless and easier for them.
So we were looking to help our teams, but then if it was successful on a broader scale outside of that team, then we said, okay, then let's look into making it publicly available in the marketplace.
Right.
So that's when we kind of went from something that was manual into something that was actually a product. And when we were doing it, we definitely had elements of the product strategy. I'll say they were kind of like do's and don'ts a little bit. I'd mentioned, I looked in the marketplace and looked for apps that pulled the ticket data out and visualized it. What I felt like was a gap was, number one, a lot of the visualization tools, they felt like they were taking a project management approach as opposed to an agile development approach. In agile, you don't care if a ticket takes 2 days or if it takes 5 days. What you're going in at sprint planning is you're saying this collection of tickets, this is what's going to be done at the end of 2 weeks. So that concept of thinking of things in sprints as opposed to individual tickets was something that I definitely felt was missing, as well as what I would call the secret sauce to success. And that was critical path and bottleneck analysis. There were a lot of apps that say they do bottleneck analysis, but I'd look at it and be like, do I need a PhD to figure out which one of these tickets is the bottleneck?
And the tool that do it, like Microsoft Project, it's so waterfall based.
Right.
And it's more rare to see a critical path like tool in an agile environment.
Correct, but it still applies.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people miss out on that. Not to turn this one into our philosophical conversation, right? But I always find it interesting when teams are like, "Oh, well, we're agile. We don't need a North Star, or we don't need to know where we're going." Like, well,
right.
You're gonna get lost. You're gonna be wandering for a while.
Correct. You got to make sure you're moving in the right direction. It may not be a straight line, right? But you should always be making progress, and you just kind of deviate as you go. More about that flexibility. But yeah, so I wanted to make sure we brought in the concepts of critical path and bottleneck analysis. We had talked before about the cohesiveness of a user experience. There were a number of apps that when I brought them up, like the color scheme was all different, the fonts were all different, and it gave me a visceral reaction of using them. So we said, no, we want something that looks like Jira. We want it to feel like Jira and have that seamless experience. That'll make user adoption easy, onboarding easy, because it's what they're already familiar with if they're using Jira.
Correct. Yeah. So that was going to be So I don't know if we're ready to talk about this, but I did want to ask. So was Colby your developer for this app?
He was not.
Okay.
It was a different team that developed it. Colby's team was still working full time on some other clients. But I don't know. Were you ever part of the code reviews or anything, Colby?
I think I might have looked at a couple, but not too deeply.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know Colby has definitely watched a few episodes of the Jira Life and that I was on. So he's been involved regardless in keeping up with things. But if that's something another time you'd like to talk to some of our developers who are actually working on the product, we could definitely talk about that.
Yeah, I'd be curious, right? Because making an Atlassian app, it's not trivial.
It's not.
Right. And so and there's a lot of documentation for Atlassian UI kits or like a native Atlassian app that looks and feels just like Jira, right? But your app, you're looking at it, even though it's within the Jira UI, it's not like, it doesn't look like Jira, right? It's a visual tool, right? And so when you go look at documentation from that perspective, you're like, well, where's that at?
Right. We definitely had to do a number of custom aspects as well to fit in the ecosystem. And that required research. We did have specific things that we set up front, such as we wanted to be a Forge app, not a Connect app. We want to look towards the future of the Atlassian marketplace, but also the benefits that Forge has about being more secure than Connect. The app runs on the Jira server. It's not on some other server. Your data stays within the Jira server. Connect apps, your data could go to some remote server. I know I downloaded some marketplace apps and they asked me to enable cookies for them to work. And I'm like, what? Like, I shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
So we definitely had some things like that, as well as some more features,
Now, how long did it take you to then go from this idea to ClearPath publishing?
Oh, so that's a little tricky because we definitely did, I'll say traditional product life cycle of MVP to MMP to MLP. And we're not even
know the other piece. Which piece?
Yeah, so MVP.
I know the MVP.
MVP is what most people know, minimum viable product. So about 3 months is what we did. So 6 sprints of development. And then we did a demo for the leadership of our division and the owner of the company, and was just kind of getting feedback of, does this look like a viable product? Does this add value? And the first time we did a visualization, it was like, whoa. Because I know Natalie was involved, but I don't think she had actually seen anything we had done until that meeting. Does that sound right, Natalie?
I had worked with the designer a little bit during design reviews, but I hadn't seen it in action yet.
Right. So the general reaction from everybody was excitement. Like this is the blueprint of how you execute a project. And we were greenlit to continue. So MVP is just demonstrating, your value proposition, but selling it is something different. So the next stage is called MMP, minimum marketable product. So then we had to look kind of at that next step. And the way I looked at it was I kind of had 4 phases of the product. Hopefully I can remember all of them. But the core value prop is the visualization. So it's visualize. Then the bottleneck and critical path is your ability to analyze the data. That was the MVP. But to bring it to market, I felt like we had to look into additional ways to synthesize it. So get this product as something that's easy to work into your everyday workflows. So what that meant to me was it can't be just something you look at. You have to be able to interact with it. You have to be able to edit tickets, create links, delete links, reverse them, make it so that it's more of a visual backlog management tool, not just a visualization tool. And then the last part that I felt was needed to get to market was some customizations, because Jira is a highly customizable tool. People expect some aspect of that. So we put in a little bit of that. And then to go from the MVP to the MMP was approximately, 8 months after that. Is what it took. And as we were going, we were still refining.
Yeah, a year at this point now, a little over a year.
Yep, a year. I think there were definitely ways that, in theory, if we had thrown more people at it, more money and stuff, we could have gotten it done quicker. But it's hard, being a startup. You kind of
Yeah,
got to.
so I'm not feeling too bad then because I've been sitting on my app idea for a year and a half, though. The delta here is not so bad.
Yeah, so it was a year to kind of, get out. And since it was our first app, we didn't know like what all we needed to do. It was a new market for us, learning about Atlassian, how to market apps, how to reach the user base, who the buyers are.
If I'm not mistaken, when you and I first met a year ago now.
Yeah, it's been about a year. That's probably about right.
There was another lady, I forgot her name, will help me out.
Melinda,
yeah. Mm-hmm. She was telling me that you guys were like documenting some of your development efforts with respect to the app, or like as a blog.
We did, yes. We had done as part of that, we had done a campaign of blog articles. We had I believe 3 by the UX designer and then 3 by the lead developer on the app, where what the thought process is we were documenting our journey building the app in ways that would be helpful to other people. So the first article by a developer, I think, was, hey, if you're new to Forge, here's how you get started. Then the second article was all about how to set up your CI/CD pipeline for the Forge app. So it's something that would help people coming into the Atlassian, ecosystem, but also they would indirectly learn about ClearPath.
Anything on that custom UI? Because you were using what was that, Vue.js, or what JS were you using for?
I think
no,
I'd have to ask one of the developers,
yeah.
But I do know that there is kind of a standard UI kit, but we learned pretty quickly that was one of the tips we had. There's like 5 tips, and one of the blog articles was just go ahead and go to custom UI, because you're going to be fairly restricted on the base UI.
Yeah, that's not, unless you actually want to use Jira's physical UI, right? You're going to have to go custom because that.
Correct.
Unless you're literally if your app is like literally an extension, like if you're adding to the ticket to the card UI, right? It's very limited.
And I think in custom UI you can still call other aspects of the Jira UI just like we do, which I'm happy to demonstrate at some point. But when you're on the tickets and you click on it, we're bringing up the actual Jira edit dialog,
right?
So you can see that issue screen.
So how did you then, as a product manager for this? How do you balance like, hey, this is what I want it to look like, because you've clearly done it manually, versus what was then technically possible with Atlassian's APIs and whatnot? Was there anything that you wanted that just didn't make the cut into either your MVP, MPP, or MVP, and one of your P's?
Yes, there's definitely things that didn't make the cut, but I think that was more based on what's currently available in the Forge interface.
Right, so a technical limitation, right? Not so much.
Correct. Yes. So there were a few that were like that. As far as the look and feel, I just trusted our designers and used the general rule of thumb of be like Jira. When in doubt, find something in Jira that looks similar to what we're trying to do, kind of use that as a pattern, and then see if that fits our specific use case.
Did you ever revisit? So it looked like you did some research, right? And you're like, hey, before I even try to do this manually, I went out and looked to see if there's another app. Did you ever kind of look at other apps and kind of see how their UIs were and things of that nature to get it? Okay.
Oh yeah. Yes, I did. And I mean, there were a few things that I got ideas from other ones of, that was a good idea, that I could see value and usability of having a similar feature. But as far as the way that we lay out tickets, particularly where we're trying to give you a recommended implementation order, that was something that was very unique. The fact that you can look at it quickly and conceptualize sprints in your mind was something that many of the other apps didn't do, particularly because they were doing things that I would say just weren't of value. Like there's a difference between being able to do something and then whether you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to visualization libraries, like there's lots of them. There's visuals that are used for DNA sequencing, and there's visuals for traffic algorithms and city streets. That doesn't mean that it applies to managing your work in Jira. And there were a number of apps that just because there was a library that produced this visual, they threw it out there and then advertised it as a feature. we said we're not going to add anything that doesn't add value. Same
Now,
thing. Okay.
I did want to ask you a question on the app here. I know that when I've used it in the past, the data needs to already be in Jira.
Correct.
Right. Remind me, can I make new stories from your UI, or do I have to go into Jira first?
That was one of the limitations of the Forge API, that recently they've added the ability to call it and make issues. So it's on the roadmap. And that's something that I want to do because I think that fits in nicely. A lot of times when you create user stories, there's natural patterns, just like in software. You can go in there, people know what a singleton is, what a factory is. There's software design patterns. Same thing with user stories. Often you go in, you're like, okay, I know I need to do my view story before I do my create, before I do my save. Where does my edit come into play? And you're already thinking of that sequencing. So to be able to go into ClearPath, just pick a ticket and say, let me create a new one, but I know the one I have selected blocks it.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to step through would be a big game changer. But that was a limitation that we had. So right now the tickets do need to exist, but you have full editing capability within ClearPath after
Once
that.
they're in there, yeah.
And
Now,
really, I'll say from my experience as a product owner, that matches how I did a lot of big efforts. Is usually I would go in and I call it skeleting out stories. Is I would just go and all I do is fill in the title, nothing else. Create story. Okay. And then I would go in and fill in the rest of the information.
Yeah, and the keyword there, or the key is to not let too much time elapse. Because I'm like that too, where I'll go put in titles and then 6 months later, I'm like, the heck was this for?
Correct. Yes. You got to keep it fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
It's at the time you created it, only you and God knew what it was. But now,
right.
6 months later, it's only God knew what that
Right.
for.
Not a position you want to be in. I know we only have a couple minutes left here. I did want to ask the inspiration for ClearPath, the name itself. What were the ideas you bounced off of? What were the other versions?
Oh, we had lots of ideas. I mean, we were definitely
Why not
looking at
Cactus
something. Yeah, we were looking at different things. I'll say with navigation, since the critical path analysis was a key feature. What's that?
TomTom Path.
TomTom Path. I would say like we threw out ideas, and I admit we went to ChatGPT and asked it for a few ideas as well. But in the end, how we got the name was Natalie had done designs for our marketing website, and she had put in there the text, see your path clearly and then it was just blank. And it's like, see your path clearly. ClearPath. Like it just seemed to come together, and everybody liked that idea.
Isn't that Natalie, when you guys become a multi-billion-dollar app?
I know. I come up with weird names accidentally, I think, for products. So.
Well, Mark, I know we're right at this top of the hour mark. I don't know if you got a couple more minutes. I know we started a little late, but if you can keep going, we can go.
Oh yeah, I definitely got more time. I'm not sure about
just another 5 minutes to kind of just tie up the loose ends here, right? So you just launched a major update for your app.
I did, or we did.
Oh,
Really.
yeah, we. I'll just add myself to the team too. We just launched a new major update.
Correct.
I think in our conversations, like I mentioned earlier, right, we've been kind of collaborating for the last year, and one of those pain points was the refreshability of when do the items get re-rendered on the screen.
Correct.
So what were some of those challenges, and why did it take us all the way till now?
I can answer that. Would you like for me to show the app and demo it while we're
talking? Yeah, do that.
Okay.
Let's show us the new version, the new 3.6?
3.6, yes. That's the one that we had just launched. There's a couple things, but I'll actually jump over here. So like I'd mentioned, we have kind of a full ability to edit, but what was happening was when you created a link line here, let's say, it was refreshing automatically and recentering the screen, but now it does all the updates in place. You'll actually see kind of like the lines animated there, knowing that what we're doing is we're syncing the change with Jira.
I love that.
Okay. So if you have something more complicated, like I'll actually have 2 tickets block here. Once you've done all your updates and you're actually ready for that screen refresh, you can come click this button right here and it will refresh everything. I'll actually do a zoom to fit based on the epics I have, and you can see the updated layout there. So that was the big change we had. What we used to do is we used to update on every edit. That was definitely a pain point. And I know this is going to sound very product manager-ish, but there are certain problems that aren't a big problem until you have more users. So we were definitely looking at key differentiators, adding more features to get more downloads, and then making sure that the editing feature was really getting used by a lot of users. And once we saw people loved it, but they wanted this refresh issue addressed, then we did address
Why
it.
don't you go address it?
Correct. And I'll actually come here and say, call this Alex's ticket. And you'll see that as you do edits on your ticket, such as the ticket title, it will refresh in place here. So you'll see the title changed. It's not changing your focus. So you're not losing the context of where you are and what you are working on. You can just keep working. And that's one of the things that ClearPath gives you, is it gives you an ability to jump through the sequencing of your work, provide the edits, the updates as you need much quicker than if you were just in that Jira backlog view.
Yeah, and I think that's super key, right? Because in a lot of my videos, and I think even for your review video, I mentioned it, right? Like context is key.
Yep.
Right. And context as a train of thought usually leaves you very quickly. And so if you have to switch back and forth between UIs or go get something from over here, go do something over there, like you can lose that train of thought and like lose like thousands of dollars of like efficiency gains, right? Just because you got to go remember what the heck you were thinking about.
Without a doubt. And it can bring context so quick as well. Like something that I've done, and I mean, Colby and Natalie haven't seen this, so this is going to be a big reveal here. But you know that Figma diagram I was showing before? I actually went in and said, if we had ClearPath when we did that project, what would it look like? So I've actually set it up here. That this is
the OG inside of your tool now.
That is correct. It's the OG. That because you've used the project before, Alex, you know all the tickets on this top row are the ones that are unblocked,
right,
and can be picked up immediately. Since they're on the same row, it's conceptually a sprint here. All of those can be parallelized, and since we had 6 developers, we could get going quite a bit. But you could see quickly 1, 2, 3. Really, it's like 3.5 full sprints worth of work. Then you get into a bunch of serial tickets here. And what we had done in order to get the project done, we recognized this, that we couldn't do sprints like we normally would. So we actually worked this project Kanban. So as soon as the ticket was done, we weren't waiting 3-4 days for the end of sprint. It's just pick up the next ticket.
Why go top down versus left to right?
Oh, so a couple reasons. And I highlighted the critical path there so you can see those tickets. That was a decision up front. It's difficult thinking of be like Jira. I'm going to go to the backlog view over here. Actually, I need to jump to the backlog. Projects, app dev. When you're in the backlog view, Jira lays sprints out vertically. As you can see, here's a sprint, here's a sprint, here's a sprint.
Ah, okay.
Whereas the backlog view is here. So when we're thinking about be like Jira, how does someone, when they look at Jira and they're doing agile work, really think about it? We felt vertical actually matched the inherent Jira capability. Also, we wanted to have an agile focus, not your traditional project management. We didn't really want people thinking of Gantt charts. We wanted them thinking sprints. So we felt by having this vertical approach as opposed to horizontal, it kind of helped break those misconceptions.
It does, because my project management hat in me or on me is thinking left to right, Gantt style.
Right. Now, we do have in the backlog looking at that, and we're looking for more feedback from users of what they'd like to see. So we have considered having some sort of toggle where you could go left to right or top down, as well as we have many other ideas of how to improve the tool when it comes to sprint planning and PI planning and those aspects.
What I would do to be a fly on the wall.
Oh, well, you're welcome to join. You know, you're a user of the app and you're also an expert of Jira. So anytime that we have focus groups, you're always welcome, Alex.
Yeah, let me know.
We enjoy talking to users, getting different opinions. Something that Natalie's probably heard me say 1,000 times by now is I like to make sure we're picking the best solutions, not just the first ones we thought of. So by having that diversity of thought, bringing a lot of people in, different experiences and backgrounds, it really helps us pick the best solution to go
Right.
with.
Those colors we see on the screen right now, are those like the epics or?
They are. So I'll zoom in. So the app is actually flexible. So if you are on Jira Premium and you have the issue hierarchy set in, this is going to be the issue color of whatever your parent is. So
Does will it only show stories though? Can you do critical paths on your epics?
you cannot. So what it does is in that issue hierarchy, and actually I could probably go to the one that I have here real quick from a demo perspective, issue hierarchy. So what it visualizes in ClearPath is this 0 level in your issue hierarchy, and then it has a reference to whatever your parent is on level 1. Now,
So what are your thoughts then on the other issue types above?
The other issue types above, we currently allow you to pick them if that's how you want to filter. So let's say I have an initiative that I want to see whatever tickets roll up to it. You can pick that initiative. We're currently still just showing the stories or this level 0, however you have your issue types configured. But we have talked about, Natalie and I, about having kind of a different visualization mode, which we call hierarchy mode, where instead of looking at your blocking dependencies, it's actually looking at how do these tickets decompose from the highest level down, so you can have that traceability up to your goals and objectives.
Yeah, because when I'm teaching teams, right, like I'm telling them start at your top, work down, but it helps to have a visual at each level,
right?
So you can see where your roadmaps are, because then you're into more roadmap territory.
Right. So that's definitely something that we have on the roadmap and something that we're looking into. I think the concept of the customized hierarchy, because you have to be on Jira Premium, correct, Alex?
Correct. Or enterprise.
Or enterprise, yeah. Premium or above. That's definitely a larger organization.
Right. But even at the epic level, there would be a lot of value, right? Because you sometimes have a lot of epics to juggle through to figure out, or let me rephrase, how is like the ranking? Can the ranking of the epic influence the order of the story view, or is it strictly based on dependencies?
It's strictly based on dependencies, because what we're trying to do is help you.
Don't have dependencies.
If they don't have dependencies put in there, then I would say they're not doing their job. I know that sounds bad, but a big part of putting your tickets in there is understanding how they relate to each other. So that
but Jira natively doesn't encourage us to depend. Like when you add dependency in Jira, it's usually for highlighting a problem, not for pre-planning.
Right. Correct. And let me rephrase, because there's different life cycles of software. If what you're doing is new development, you should be doing product increment, something that takes multiple sprints in order to execute. You would have dependencies on those tickets to show what that order of execution is.
Right.
As opposed to if you have a product already out there and what you're doing is more sustainment, let's say you're doing bugs and little enhancements, those are tickets that are really one-offs where you wouldn't have the dependencies in there. So the statement I had a little bit earlier was a little strong. It depends on what the life cycle, where you are in the life cycle of your product, whether you should be putting in those dependencies.
But still food for thought for me, because again, I don't usually think in a dependency forward way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm usually leveraging the power of ranking, the power of the priority field in Jira, the power of I have an ordered list of epics. Let me decompose them naturally that way and come up with my stories there.
And that's a way to potentially do it. It's funny because I ignore those fields. I don't really use priority. I generally use rank. If something's going to be tickets that we're going to execute earlier, I do put it higher up in the backlog too. But just because this ticket is one level above this one doesn't mean it's a higher priority, because it could be 2 tickets you can parallelize. And you have to trust your team and empower them of, here's a collection of tickets. How do you all think is the best way to get this work done? What's going to be most efficient for you? Priority, I only use if we're in sprint and there is a very key ticket, such as, let's say it's on the critical path, or if you have a Scrum team that's also responsible for production support and you have a production issue come in, that's got to be a high priority. I'll use the priority field for that. But items in the backlog, I don't change priority. I don't see value of it.
Okay. Well, Mark, I know we're right at that hour-long mark here now, so appreciate you and your team. Natalie, Kobe, great meeting you all. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to come reminisce a little bit. Hopefully it was nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice little trip down memory lane, and thank you all for sharing the story of how this app came to be. I don't think a lot of apps out there document their origin story like this. So I'm glad we got this captured in the history books.
This has been fun. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you all.